It's...
You. Again.
What do you want?
Rules. You. Go.
Jonas, where did you...
Is. Leave. Possible.
7 years after Night School Studios released Oxenfree, the walking talking adventure game where a group of teenagers have to endure a night of ghosts and time distortion, they released Oxenfree 2, where a couple of adults have to endure a night of ghosts and time distortion. Oxenfree 2 is very similar to the first game, and I will be drawing comparisons to it frequently, so it would be best for you to have either played the original, or at least be familiar with it by, I don't know, watching a review of it? Maybe like this one here? I'm almost surprised at how similar it looks to the first game. To my admittedly untrained eye, the backdrops look near identical. They might be a little bit crisper in the second game, but there's not much in it. I sound like I'm criticising, and that's not my intention. Oxenfree is a very pretty game, with a lovely stylized watercolour, paper cutouts aesthetic, so more of the same is no bad thing. It continues, like the first game, to look pretty, but also come off as quite foreboding, probably due to the dark colours. What I do think has improved visually since the first game are the animations, which are a bit smoother, and the character models, which blend into the backdrops much better. Also returning are plenty of mad visions and transitions in and out of them. Like the first game, they're all pretty cool when they aren't genuinely creeping you out.
Jacob?
Continuing with improvements, the sequel has audio sliders, so if you find that you're struggling to hear the dialogue, you can now adjust the music and sound effects until you get the right balance. The music is once again composed by Scientific, which, just like the backdrops, could have come straight from the first game. It's still got that crunchy, synth-heavy sound, and similar to how the backdrops are pretty but foreboding, the music is often peaceful yet ominous. Very fitting for a game that mostly involves chatting and hiking, but with a healthy dose of unsettling events and a goal of stopping something barely understood. But we'll get to that. So music, maybe not quite as good as the first, which I think had some more standout tracks, but still, again, really great. The voice acting and direction is as excellent as it was in the first one.
Are you okay?
I don't know. Are you okay? You seem alive, which is maybe more than I can say for myself right now.
I am many, many miles from feeling okay.
Yeah, me too. Well, wait, are we talking physically or mentally? Yeah!
Honestly, I'd go so far as to say flawless. All characters were believable and kept me immersed. It's obviously very important for a game that involves so much talking to have convincing VA, and it does.
Once. Now you go. Once.
Santa.
Okay. 8. Once Santa 8.
14.
Ooh, good one. Children. I don't know why I said children, but let's just go with it.
Loudly.
Brilliant. Great. The end. Okay, so let's review. Once Santa ate 14 children loudly. The end.
So, good job. In terms of gameplay, you are once again trekking around an area to various destinations, and along the way conversing, experiencing creepy visions, and occasionally having to exercise someone. These gameplay elements have been expanded upon slightly. Exploration-wise, the map is bigger and you do much more climbing cliff faces and descending ropes rather than just following paths, though it is still basically linear, but it makes travelling that little bit more varied. You'll still be talking plenty by choosing one of 3 options or choosing to remain silent, although it was a feature the studio seemed quite proud of in the first game as a way of portraying naturalistic dialogue. There are far fewer interruptions in this one. It's possible this is a change that was made due to it being a fairly common complaint that one was never sure if Alex was going to interrupt current speaker. However, it may instead be because most of the conversations in this game take place between adults who are less likely to cut each other off.
Just give me a holler. Anytime. I'll be up all night.
Sure, I just might. Over.
Okay, thanks for the help again.
You only have one travelling companion this time, and he is who you will be speaking to the most. However, they have also added in a walkie-talkie feature, and this allows you to converse Firewatch style with several people whom you will never meet while you're exploring, which is a neat idea, as it not only allows you to speak to people other than your travelling companion, but also because you no longer get cut off when you change areas, so you can seamlessly keep a conversation going as you make your way to your destination.
But I signed up for this partly because of how weird everything's been. Evelyn won't get into it, but you can tune into super strange stuff if you know how to find it.
That being said, it does not always work perfectly in practice. In my first playthrough, I was being very careful and generally didn't move very far while I was talking to someone, often standing completely still so I could give the conversation my full attention. In my second playthrough, I endeavoured to use it more as intended, as something to do while exploring, but in doing so, I found I kept getting interrupted by story triggers.
Below it was an actual burning hell. A triangle, or...
Ah.
There are days I admire its beauty.
Oh, wait.
Just out of nowhere. This was right in the middle of a... Charlie, are you there?
This usually meant that I had to start the conversation over from the beginning each time, which wasn't great for flow or immersion. By the time I reached what I knew to be the point of no return, it being my second playthrough, I found myself having to run back and forth between the same two areas so that I could trigger the next phase of each contact's dialogue. Unfortunately, I'm not sure there's an answer to this. You can't possibly predict at which points your players are going to choose to use their walkie-talkies, so you can't possibly hope to get the timing exactly right. Despite this, the game is definitely better off for its inclusion. Those are your two main gameplay features, but there are some smaller things that I want to touch on. The radio does make a return, but there's less of a focus on it. It's used to exercise the possessed, open 2 radio locks, and tune into a couple of Bioshock Infinite style time tears which allow you to get around obstacles in your path, but there are no anomalies or museum exhibits this time round, so it's not used as much. In the place of the tape machines you had to spin in order to break out of the time loops, there are new machines with a simple but more interesting minigame in which you have to use 4 sliders to create a copy of a 3D shape. To be honest, I never really understood exactly what I was doing with this, but it usually didn't take much more than fiddling with the sliders for 30 seconds to get the answer. Still, much more engaging than just rotating your mouse in a circle. You can collect more letters from Maggie Adler, and they give you some information on her later life, but they're not as interesting as finding out about the Kanaloa and Anna. I only had a couple of technical problems, not sure if either were bugs or just overlooked design, but neither had much of an impact. I had one visual bug, which was pretty funny, though I admittedly wasn't laughing when it seemed to be stopping me from continuing. The game saves automatically and on one slot, so if you do run into a game-breaking bug that you can't fix, you would have to restart from the beginning. Thankfully turned out not to be the case in this instance. Right. Story. The game takes place 5 years after the events of Oxenfree 1, in the town of Kamina, which isn't far from Edwards Island. In fact, players of the first game may recognise a certain ferry in the harbour, and a certain market if they got the secret ending. We open with our protagonist, Riley, having a nightmare before suddenly jerking awake in a bus stop as she is contacted on her walkie-talkie by Evelyn, an environmental researcher who has hired her to place some radio transmitters at high altitudes along the coast so that she can better study anomalous frequencies, specifically disruptions in the electromagnetic spectrum, which have become more and more noticeable over the past few months. Riley is told she has a partner for this job, Jacob, who will provide transport via his car, and whom she meets just up the road trying, and ultimately failing, to fix his car. Guess we're walking. There's some initial small talk between the two as they make their way to place the first transmitter, and we get something of an idea of their personalities. Riley comes across a bit standoffish in conversation, but also scales a cliff face so that they can get past the locked gate, demonstrating that she is obviously adventurous and potentially foolhardy. Jacob, on the other hand, is polite, but seems a bit socially awkward.
Yeah, these woods will kill you if you let them.
These woods will kill you? What does that mean?
Oh, You know, we have a pretty big black bear population, so of that and other stuff. All right. Thanks for the stop.
Jacob reminds Riley that they went to school together, and then goes on to talk about what he believes happened to the Kanaloa. An odd choice of topic for an introductory conversation, but no doubt the real purpose is to bring new players up to speed. They reach the spot and place the first transmitter. As they switch it on, it shoots out a beam of energy, which smashes into a newly revealed triangular portal hovering over Edwards Island. And then the classic Oxenfree brand of weird shit begins. That seems like a good spot for a spoiler warning, so if you are interested in experiencing the story for yourself and like what you've heard so far, especially if you played the first game, I would recommend pausing here and doing so. First, Riley is teleported onto Edwards Island, where she sees 3 teenagers in masks surrounding what looks like a makeshift antenna, before briefly having a vision of herself and a small child. Then she's back at the bus stop with Evelyn contacting her, back where we started. Riley goes through a couple of time loops, catching glimpses of one of the teenagers she saw, before using one of the machines to break the loop. She finds Jacob at his car again, and he, thankfully, is having the same experience, but doesn't know what's happening. They speak to Evelyn, who urges them to return to the transmitter to see what it's doing, and they reluctantly agree. Though, not before Jacob takes the opportunity to negotiate some sweet new benefits.
Yeah, but we need assurances. Time and a half. And medical. In case our damn skin melts off.
I am sure we can cover expenses, Jacob.
They head back to the transmitter and find it as it was, still shooting out a ray of energy. Jacob then gets possessed, and Riley has to perform her first radio exorcism. She gets hit with a couple of visions, one of her old and drunk in a bar, and another of her passed out on a sofa.
Hey, wait, buddy. You were talking to her earlier.
That was a cool one. I liked that one. The ghosts make their first appearance and make it clear that they know who Riley is. They both black out and wake up halfway across Kamina. Jacob, as it turns out, was friendly with Maggie Adler when he was younger, and as a result of the conversations they had, immediately works out what is happening and takes Riley back to his cottage, as he calls it. He inherited it from his parents after they died, so that they can find her old journals, which he has stored somewhere. After Riley clambers in through an open window because Jacob has managed to lock himself out, they find the journals and come up with a plan which, to save you from a bunch of made-up ghost radio theory that doesn't really matter, is to plant 3 more transmitters, which will shut the portal down. This, as a plot point, is noticeably convenient. It's been about 5-10 minutes since these two have had their first paranormal time distortion experience, and they already know exactly what they need to do to save the day. Or night, I guess. Still, I'll allow it, given that the alternative would be the two of them having to rediscover that which most players will already know. I'll summarise the next quarter or so of the story, as Riley and Jacob hike their way around Kamina and plant 2 of the 3 transmitters. Along the way, they continue to have more visions. Most notably, Riley starts having some that are sometimes of important conversations between her and her father, and sometimes of similarly important conversations between her and her yet-to-be-born son, Rex. The two also discovered the identities of the 3 teenagers that Riley saw on Edwards Island: Olivia, Violet, and Charlie. Olivia's parents died in a plane crash 2 years ago, and they were leaders of a cult with a dark history called Parentage. It's not clear what the 3 are trying to do, but Jacob and Riley are sufficiently alarmed. They run into both Violet and Charlie en route to the transmitter locations, though they get very little out of them. Violet is scared, and Charlie acts like a brat, but neither of them seem like unusual teenagers. After planting the second of the 3, they overhear the teenagers on the radio planning to disrupt the transmitters using equipment at the Parentage Community Center. Riley and Jacob manage to get there first and destroy the equipment, but while poking around trying to find it, they confess that the cult may be a bit strange but doesn't seem especially sinister. The teenagers arrive, and Olivia is furious that they've destroyed the equipment. She starts to babble about various concepts she's clearly been taught by Parentage. Lunar veils, blue moons, and Yanis being aligned, but she's not explaining what it is she's trying to do. All of a sudden, the ghosts arrive, and the beginnings of a portal appear at the top of the building. Olivia rushes to tune into it, and Riley rushes to stop her. And if you thought shit was getting weird before, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Get way on her. Get out. Just shake off.
Riley eventually manages to stop her by taking her radio, and it's finally revealed that Olivia's goal is to trap herself in a moment where she was happiest with her parents for eternity, something the ghosts have promised her. She clearly believes that their existence ties into parentage's beliefs, and that this objective can only be achieved tonight. Now casting something of a pathetic figure, she begs for her radio back. She just desperately wants to see her parents again. But she's willing to let others get hurt in the process. Suddenly, everyone but Riley is possessed again. The damn Kanaloa crew, they're growing in strength again. Or are they?
I'm sorry, the night's progressed to the point where I can speak a little more freely. My name's Alex. These are my friends.
Alex?
Yeah, Alex. Named after my great-grandmother, Alexandra.
We were teenagers, like Olivia and her friends.
We went to Edwards Island, I don't know, years ago, months, weeks from now. It's hard to tell.
It used to be a military base, but now it's...
I got it, Ren. Thank you.
We got stuck. That's the point.
And now we can't get out.
We can get out. We just need a little boost.
It's not the crew of the Kanaloa you're trying to stop. It's Alex. It's Jonas, Ren, Nona, and Clarissa. They're trying to get back, and they want to use Olivia to do it, reasoning that she actively wants to be trapped in time with her parents. Alex reveals that they have tried to escape many, many times, and Riley is always the one who stops them, much like Alex did in the first game. But she believes this time will be different because she hasn't tried it with Olivia before. She asks Riley to examine what she really wants before vanishing, leaving Riley and Jacob alone. Maybe I should have seen this one coming, but I was honestly so unsure that we were actually going to get a definite answer on what happened to Alex and her friends that I was genuinely surprised by this twist. It also confirms the theory that no matter what choices are made in the first game, they always end up stuck on Edwards Island. Though I'm not entirely sure how that fits with the secret ending, but I guess when it comes to infinite timelines there's always a caveat. Anyhow, despite expressing some discomfort at this new information, Jacob and Riley are still determined that they need to be stopped and continue with the plan to plant the final transmitter. This last location is on top of a rickety church, and just before they are about to activate the transmitter, Jacob falls through the roof. Riley goes down after him, but it's taking far too long to get down. She's terrorized by more visions of Jacob dying, but when they end, Jacob is somehow unhurt. They climb back out, activate the transmitter, and the portal closes. Jacob and Riley, relieved that it's all over, head back into town for a well-deserved rest. In conclusion, I would say Oxenfree 2 is pretty good. It really wraps the story up nicely. Bet you thought that was really the end, but it was actually just a prank. On the way back in, Alex reappears, this time actually as herself, and explains that Olivia is headed to Edwards Island to open another portal, this time with the aid of the Kanaloa crew instead of Alex. It was also the crew terrorizing Riley in the church, and this will lead to a more hostile swap and affect a larger area. This was the other part of the story that I thought was rather convenient. Oh, you closed my portal? Well, I'll just open another one. I'm surprised more people haven't, given how fucking easy it apparently is. They head to the dock to commandeer a vessel, but just before they set off, Athena, Jacob's dog, who he's been keeping an eye out for all night, appears.
No.
After a brief reunion, he ties her to the bus stop so that someone will find her if they don't return. Heading to Edwards Island is the finale, and at this point you can either set off or insist that Jacob stays behind to look after his dog, and Riley can go alone. Either way, they get there, and it looks nearly identical to how it did in the first game. You can even tune into the first radio exhibit.
And remains, to this day, the only submarine casualty in American waters.
They are teleported to the beach, where they see the echoes of Alex and her friends from just before they tuned into the portal. and Alex expresses her regret, going so far as to even say she wished she drowned instead of Michael. Then she warns Riley that every other time she's tried this, Riley has never come to Edwards Island, and she doesn't know what that means. They are teleported again, this time to the comms tower, where Olivia is opening the portal. As they implore the Kanaloa crew to stop, Riley gets possessed, effectively getting trapped inside visions. She can vaguely hear Alex and Jacob trying to get her to come back, in between the sights and sounds of fragments of her life, explaining to her dad that she gave up on going into the military, breaking up with someone, getting fired.
Every other day this month. Robbie, come on. You know that.
And then she finds her son, Rex, now grown up, and fishing. The conversation is cryptic, as you might expect. We get the impression that Rex and Riley have, or will have, a complicated relationship. I'm going to talk about this more after I've wrapped up the story, but Riley's never quite had her life in order. And although she tried to rectify this when she found out she was pregnant, it sounds as if she didn't always succeed. She's in a slump, and she has been for a long time. And Rex is here to tell her that she needs to want to do something, to make a change. She has to want it if she wants to get out. So, after a little resistance, she does this, and is back in the thick of it. She tunes into the portal, and this allows her to lock it. Not sure why she can do this now, but again, doesn't really matter, not going to focus on the made-up mechanics behind the radio portals. With the crew pushed back, Alex, Riley, Olivia, and Jacob, if he came, find themselves in between. Alex explains that one of them needs to lock the portal from the other side as she did in the first game. And so we come to the big choice. One of the three has to trap themselves in a moment in time of their choice for eternity. While I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a straightforward choice, the difficulty is somewhat undermined by the fact that Olivia desperately wants to go. I'm not saying it's easy to allow a grief-stricken teenager to commit herself to throwing the rest of her life away, but the fact is that one of them has to do it, and again, she actively wants to go. To her, returning back to normality is a punishment. It is therefore unsurprising that most players pick her. The second most popular choice is Riley, though I do think that number is inflated by second playthroughs. But there is still a reason why she would go. We've already established that Olivia isn't really in a fit state or age to be making such a huge decision, and Alex does confirm to Riley that her relationship with Rex will eventually fall apart. It's true of all the timelines. Riley doesn't have to face this if she chooses to close the portal instead. Overwhelmingly in third place, and again, even these small numbers are probably inflated by multiple playthroughs, is Jacob, who, of course, potentially won't even be there. I played through the game twice, so had to look up the Jacob ending, and it seems to me like one they just sort of bunged on, because it's not really fleshed out. Jacob only even volunteers to go if you've been mean to him throughout the game, which you would have to go out of your way to do given how nice he is. If you haven't been mean to him, he says almost nothing during the deliberations, in which case picking him makes even less sense. This one doesn't really seem to fit like the other two do. If you choose Olivia or Jacob, then Riley will wake up at the bus stop from the beginning with Evelyn calling her about the job, only now it's no longer about anomalous frequencies. Alex and friends walk by and Alex stops to chat to Riley. She's the only one of her friends to remember the ordeal they've been through. Jonas, Ren, Clarissa and Nona will remember nothing of their trip to Edwards Island that fateful night, which, considering that the group disappeared a few years before the events of Oxenfree 2, does raise some questions about how they can reappear and reintegrate back into the same timeline at the same age, but I'll put it down to crazy time nonsense. If you choose Olivia, then Riley finds Athena and Jacob, who remembers as well, and they have a final conversation about what they've been through. Jacob finishes by suggesting all one can do is try to find comfort in the passage of time. If you choose Jacob, then Riley finds Athena and has a one-sided conversation reminiscing about him. If you choose Riley, then she wakes up at the bus stop, in the moment in time that she's picked. She and Rex go on a hike together, and their conversation turns to the book Black Beauty, which Rex is reading in school. He complains about the ending, saying stories shouldn't end where they began, and the player can choose how Riley responds to that. The game ends with Alex sending a box of items and a letter to either Rex or Riley's dad. The items are just there to tell you what percentage of players made which choices. The letter reminds the recipient that Riley is a complicated person, just as we are all complicated people.
Alright, I think that's it. Oh, and stay off the radio.
And so, 7 years later, we see the cliffhanger of Oxenfree 1 resolved. I guess if I'm being honest, I don't think Oxenfree 2's actual story is that great. For most of it, your objective is to set up some transmitters to beam energy into a portal to stop the ghosts getting out. A portal which, once finally closed, is immediately reopened by the same person who opened the first one. We don't really know why, at the end of the game, Alex and her friends can be saved using the Kanaloa Crew's portal. Not to mention that the Kanaloa Crew themselves, for whom we had at least some sympathy in the first game as victims of an unfortunate accident, get no redemption or satisfying conclusion, but are left simply as the antagonists whom we can only assume will continue to try and get out of the twisted time hell that they have been left in. But, and I suppose the same thing could be said of the first game, it's not the plot itself where the game shines, but instead in its characters and their conversations. And in that aspect, I think Oxenfree 2 is even stronger. I think the shift to grown-up protagonists, to an adult perspective, was the right one. While there was something pleasantly Goonies about having a group of teenagers trying to find their way out of an insane situation, a pair of adults having to do the same thing allows for greater depth and more mature discussions.
Not all those who wander are lost.
A very famous quote from The Lord of the Rings that I imagine many people at one stage or another in their life have tried to take some comfort in. Riley and Jacob are both lost in their own ways. Riley fled from home and bounced around, not committing to anything in life, too scared to do so until she winds up pregnant and she finally has something to focus on. But she's still scared, and to change in the way that she needs to isn't that simple. Jacob is similar and yet opposite. His brother moved away from their backwater town to live in New York City, leaving Jacob behind in Kamina as the local handyman. He's very conscious of time slipping by, and feels there should be more significance to his life, but he also doesn't know what to focus on, and wonders if he's already made the wrong decisions. I imagine that most people can identify with one or both of these characters. Certainly, for me, I felt very in tune with Jacob. There's a scene when crossing into Garland, an old, barred-off, dead part of town, where you cross a bridge that was built in the 1800s, and Jacob starts to talk about how the bridge would have once been important, a landmark to the people who used it, but now decrepit and forgotten. It doesn't come out as a perfectly formed thought. It's a bit of a ramble. It's written to be. It's exactly the sort of thing that I would say when I suddenly feel like I need to emphasize the importance of something that shouldn't go unsaid. Not really conveying what I mean, and ultimately feeling like I never really managed to say what I wanted to at all. Jacob tries to find the point by saying,
"It just makes you think. I don't want to live forever, but I don't want to die forever either. You know what I mean?"
I was surprised when reviewing the footage to see that I was so absorbed by what Jacob was saying that I failed to reply to him on both playthroughs. Sometimes I'll watch those crazy planet comparison videos you can find on YouTube, and other times I'll just look up at the stars when I'm walking home late. It has the same effect either way. Such a vast universe of a size beyond comprehension, with an unfathomable amount of time behind it and an equally unfathomable amount of time still to come. I have already won the cosmic lottery by being alive at all. I'm lucky to exist. But what a heavy load to bear. How, when I am so impossibly small, and my existence is but a flicker on the great timeline, do I honor that good fortune? How do I make my life worthwhile? It's a trick question, of course. I could become emperor over the entirety of our pale blue dot and still it would mean nothing to the grandeur of the universe. So, as Jacob says to Riley at the appropriate ending,
and she said something to me about waves, about the ocean, how it was eternal like time itself. And when I woke up, I felt comforted by that. I think that's all you can do in the face of it. Be comforted.
This is just one example, and as mentioned, Riley does chat with others on her walkie-talkie, but I think the conversations between her and Jacob are the best. This isn't a topic that I would particularly like to discuss with someone in real life, because no one can give me the answers. But to hear it discussed by two characters that have been written is cathartic, because it proves that someone else on this planet is having those same thoughts. It's not quite comfort, but I'll take what I can get. And I think this is Oxenfree 2's greatest strength. These characters feel real, and I enjoyed being in their company. So, in conclusion, for real this time, I think the wait was worth it. It's a very similar sequel, but with a new adjusted perspective, which, as I said, I think was a smart decision. It continues to look and sound good, and while the plot itself may leave a little more to be desired, the characters and the dialogue make up for it. You should definitely play the first game beforehand for the extra context, and whether or not you like the first game will be a good indicator of whether or not you will like this one. Thanks for watching.